Kate Holloway pressed her palm flat against the barn door, her whole body shaking not from the storm outside, but from the words in her hand. He is not broken. He is a key. Trust no one. She had buried a husband. She had buried her pride. She was not about to bury the one thing that had walked into her life uninvited and refused to leave. Whoever you are, she whispered into the dark, you picked the wrong widow to threaten. If you're new here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button and stay with me till the very end of Kate's story. And tell me in the comments what city you're watching from tonight. I read every single one. The wind hit Whispering Pines Ranch like something with teeth. Kate Holloway sat up in bed so fast her spine cracked, one hand already reaching for the shotgun she kept leaned against the nightstand. Thunder rolled low across the hills, and underneath it, unmistakable, came the sound of the barn door slamming against its frame. Once, twice, a third time harder, like something inside wanted out. Lord above, she muttered, dragging her shawl over her nightgown. Not tonight. She was 38 years old, and she had buried a husband 2 summers back. And in those 2 summers, she had learned that trouble in the middle of the night never once turned out to be nothing. She grabbed the lantern off the hook by the door and went out into the wind barefoot, because her boots were by the fire and she wasn't about to waste the 10 seconds it would take to find them. The yard was chaos. Sheets of rain slanted sideways. Somewhere a shutter banged loose. And ahead of her the barn door hung wide open, swinging on its hinge, throwing a long black rectangle of dark against the mud. "Frank!" she shouted toward the bunkhouse. "Frank, get up!" No answer. The old foreman slept like the dead these days, and she didn't have time to wait on him. She crossed the yard at a run lantern light, jumping wild across the fence rails, and pushed into the barn. She stopped so sudden her boots would have skidded if she'd been wearing any. There was a horse standing in the third stall. Not her horse. Not any horse she owned. Not any horse from the county. Not any horse she had ever laid eyes on in her whole life. He was enormous, a deep, blood-roan color that looked almost black in the lantern light. And he stood so still, so unnaturally still, that for one long moment Kate thought her eyes were playing tricks brought on by too little sleep and too much grief. Then he turned his head and looked at her. "Well," Kate breathed, "you're not supposed to be here." The horse didn't spook, didn't so much as flick an ear the way any sane animal would at a stranger bursting in with a lantern in a storm. He just watched her dark eyes steady, and something about that stillness crawled up the back of Kate's neck. She stepped closer, slow, the way she'd been taught to move around strange stock. "Where'd you come from, huh? Somebody's prize gelding wander off during the storm." That was when she saw it. Nailed to the wood of the stall door, flapping once in the wind that still gusted through the open barn doors, was a plain white envelope. Kate's stomach dropped before her mind had even caught up to why. She set the lantern on the nail beside it, hands not quite steady, and pulled the envelope free. No name on the front. No stamp. No postmark. Nothing to say where it had come from or who had left it. Just her name written in a hand she didn't recognize in ink that hadn't fully dried. Kate Holloway. "Somebody was here," she said out loud to no one, to the horse, to the storm. Somebody was standing right here. She tore it open with a finger that shook harder than she wanted to admit and pulled out a single folded sheet. "He is not broken. He is a key. Keep him hidden until the solstice. Trust no one, least of all Sen." Kate read it twice. Then a third time, because the words didn't rearrange themselves into anything that made sense, no matter how many times she looked at them. "What in God's name?" she whispered. Behind her, the horse stomped, once hard iron shoe cracking against the packed dirt floor. Kate spun, heart slamming, and found him watching her. Still ears pricked forward, now alert, in a way he hadn't been a moment before, like the words on that page had meant something to him too. "You understand me," Kate said, half a laugh, half something closer to fear. "That's crazy. Horses don't understand English, mister. Whatever you are." He blew out through his nose, long and slow, and lowered his head an inch. Not submission. Something else. Something that looked almost like patience. "Kate." Frank Doyle's voice cut through the rain, and a second later, the old foreman came stumbling into the barn in his nightshirt and unlaced boots, a rifle held crooked in one arm, gray hair plastered flat to his skull. He'd worked this ranch since before Kate's husband Daniel had ever set foot on it, and in all that time, Kate had rarely seen him move as fast as he moved now, old joints and all. "I heard you hollering," he said, breathless, and then his eyes landed on the horse and he stopped dead. "Well, I'll be damned." "Language," Kate said automatically, though her own voice had no real scold left in it. "Where'd that come from?" Frank stepped closer, squinting through the lantern light. "That ain't no ranch horse. Look at the size of him. Look at that chest." He whistled low. "That's cavalry stock, or I've never seen it. Or bred for it anyhow. I don't know where he came from." Kate held up the letter hand, still trembling. "But somebody left this nailed to his stall." Frank took it from her, tilted it toward the lantern, and read it with his lips moving slightly the way they did when he was concentrating hard. When he finished, he looked up at her, and there wasn't a lick of humor left in his weathered face. "Sen?" he said. "As in Victor Sen. I don't know who else it'd mean." "Kate!" Frank's voice dropped low and urgent. The voice he used when he was trying to talk sense into her about the herd or the mortgage or anything else she didn't want to hear. "Victor Sen is not a man you cross. You understand that he's bought up half of Larkspur County in the last 2 years. Ranches twice the size of ours. Man who owned the Cutter spread turned up dead in a canyon, and everybody knows why, they just don't say it out loud." "I'm not crossing anybody," Kate said. "I found a horse in my barn." "You found a horse with a note telling you to hide him from the most dangerous man in 3 counties is what you found." Frank shoved the letter back at her like it had burned him. "That ain't a stray, Kate. That's a target nailed right to your property, and it's going to bring trouble down on this ranch whether you want it or not." Kate looked past him back at the horse. He'd gone still again, watching the two of them argue like he understood every word, and God help her, some part of her was starting to believe he did. "Somebody trusted me with him," she said quietly. "Whoever wrote that letter picked my barn, my stall, my name." Or somebody wanted to hand their problem off to the nearest fool willing to take it in. "I'm not a fool, Frank Doyle, and you'd best remember who signs your wages." That landed the way she meant it to. Frank's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue further, just shook his head slow, rainwater dripping off his nose. "You're your husband's widow through and through. You know that Daniel never could leave a stray thing be either. Look where stubbornness got him." The words hit harder than Frank probably intended, and for a second the barn went silent, except for the rain hammering the roof and the horse's slow, even breathing. "That's not fair," Kate said finally, voice tight. Frank had the decency to look ashamed. "No, it wasn't. I'm sorry." He rubbed a hand down his face. "I just don't want to bury anybody else on this land, Kate. That's all this is. I've dug enough graves for one lifetime." Kate softened some because she knew that was true. Knew Frank had stood beside her at Daniel's grave 2 summers back with his hat in his hands and grief in his eyes just as raw as her own. "I know," she said. "I know you have. So what are you going to do with him?" Kate looked at the horse one more time. He met her eyes without flinching, without fear, without any of the wariness a strange animal ought to show. 2 people arguing in raised voices 6 feet away. "I'm going to do what the letter said," she said. "I'm going to keep him hidden. Kate, he came to my barn, Frank. Not the Cutter place, not the Ashworth spread, not any of the fancy outfits in the valley. Mine." She squared her shoulders. "Somebody thought I could be trusted with something important. I don't intend to prove them wrong." Frank studied her a long moment, rain still dripping steady off the brim of his hat. And then he sighed, the particular sigh of a man who'd lost an argument he never really expected to win. "Lord help us both then." He glanced at the horse. "What are we calling him?" Kate hadn't thought that far. She looked at the horse, at the deep, steady dark of his eyes, at the way he carried himself, even standing still, like something out of an old story, something that belonged to a bigger tale than a rainy night on a widow's ranch. "Ethelgard." She said the name coming to her from nowhere and everywhere at once, like she'd always known it. "His name is Ethelgard." The horse tossed his head, once mane snapping in the wind, still gusting through the open door, and stomped his foot again, and this time Kate could have sworn, though she'd never say it out loud to another living soul, that it looked almost like agreement. By the time the storm broke toward dawn, Kate hadn't slept a wink. She sat on an overturned feed bucket just outside Ethelgard's stall lantern, burned down low, the letter folded in her lap for the 100th time. Frank had gone back to the bunkhouse, grumbling about old bones and young foolishness, leaving her alone with the horse and her thoughts, which was exactly how she wanted it. "You're not going to tell me anything, are you?" she said to him. "Just going to stand there looking mysterious." Ethelgard shifted his weight, ears swiveling toward her voice, and said nothing at all on account of being a horse. "Right. Foolish of me." She was still sitting there, half dozing against the stall post, when the sound of hoofbeats on the drive jerked her fully awake. Not the storm this time. Real hoofbeats, a single rider coming up slow and steady from the main road. Kate was on her feet with the shotgun in her hands before she'd even decided to move. She stepped out of the barn into the gray light just before sunrise mud sucking at her bare feet, and found a stranger reining in his horse at the edge of her yard. He was younger than Frank by a good 20 years older than her by maybe 5 or 6, with the kind of weathered, sun-worn face that came from a lifetime spent outdoors, rather than any particular age. His hat was pulled low against the last of the rain, and he held both hands loose and visible on the reins, which told Kate he'd seen a shotgun aimed his way before, and knew better than to make any sudden moves. "Morning, ma'am," he said, voice easy, unhurried. "Didn't mean to come up on you armed. Storm caught me on the road, and I saw your lantern light still burning." "That's not an explanation for why you're on my property at first light," Kate said, shotgun steady. "No, ma'am, I reckon it isn't." A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth, gone almost as soon as it appeared. "Name's Wade Calloway. I'm passing through looking for honest work, and I noticed your fence lines down along the east pasture. Figured I'd offer to fix it in exchange for breakfast if you're of a mind to trust a stranger that far." "I'm not of a mind to trust anybody this morning, Mr. Calloway." "Fair enough." He didn't argue, didn't push, just sat his horse easy and let her look him over. "I'll be on my way then. Sorry to trouble you." He started to turn his horse, and something about the plain, unbothered way he accepted her refusal, no wheedling, no false charm, no offense taken, made Kate lower the shotgun an inch. "Wait." The word was out before she'd fully decided on it. "You said the east fence is down. 2 sections near, as I could tell from the road. Storm likely took a tree down on it." Kate glanced back over her shoulder toward the barn, toward the horse hidden inside it, that the whole world apparently wanted to find. A downed fence on the east pasture closest to the road was exactly the kind of gap that could let anybody wander onto her land unannounced. "All right," she said slowly. "Breakfast for fence work. But you eat in the kitchen, Mr. Calloway, not the barn, and you keep to the east pasture. Nowhere else." Something in his eyes sharpened just slightly at that last part, like a man noticing a door somebody was trying too hard not to point at. But he only tipped his hat. "Wouldn't dream of overstepping, ma'am." 2 hours later, with the sun climbing hot and the storm nothing but mud and broken branches in its wake, Kate stood at her kitchen window watching Wade Calloway drive a fence post with the kind of easy, economical strength that came from years of hard work rather than showing off. He hadn't asked a single question about the barn, hadn't so much as glanced toward it twice, and that restraint told Kate more about the man than an hour of conversation might have. Frank came in through the back door, hat in hand, face grim. "We got a problem," he said. Kate turned from the window. "What kind?" "Ryder came through the Ashworth place an hour ago asking questions. Description of the horse. Description of the letter." Frank's jaw was tight. Ashworth's boy told him nothing on account of not knowing nothing, but the man didn't leave. Just kept riding the roads. Slow. Looking. Kate's stomach turned to ice. "Sen's man. Has to be." Frank crossed to the window beside her, glanced out at Wade working the fence line, and lowered his voice further. "And now you got a stranger on the property the same morning that horse shows up. You don't find that a mite suspicious?" "He offered to fix the fence for breakfast, Frank. That's not exactly the profile of a corporate spy. That's exactly the profile of a corporate spy, Kate. A good one anyhow. Frank shook his head. I don't like it. Any of it. Not the horse, not the letter, not the timing, and not him. Kate looked back out the window. Wade had stopped his work for a moment, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his forearm, and for just a second, his gaze drifted toward the barn, quick, almost too quick to catch, before he turned back to the fence post, like nothing had happened. Kate's chest tightened. Watch him, she said quietly. Close. But don't spook him off the property yet. If Sen's already got a man riding the roads asking questions, I'd rather know who's watching us than send them off to report back with nothing. You're playing a dangerous game. I buried my husband 2 years ago, Frank. I know what dangerous feels like. Kate set her jaw. This is my ranch, my barn, my horse now, whether I asked for him or not. I'm not handing any of it over to Victor Sen without a fight. Frank studied her for a long moment, and whatever he saw in her face seemed to settle something in him, because he nodded once, slow. All right then, he said. We fight. Outside, Wade Calloway drove the last post into the mud, straightened, and looked once more, longer this time, toward the barn, where Ethelgard stood in the dark, waiting on a solstice that was still weeks away, and a truth that hadn't yet been spoken out loud by anyone who understood the whole of it. Kate didn't see that second look, but somewhere deep in her chest, in the same place that had known to name the horse. The instant she looked into his eyes, something told her the quiet was already ending, that the storm last night had only been the first knock at her door, and that Whispering Pines Ranch and the widow who ran it alone were about to be tested in ways she hadn't faced since the day they lowered Daniel into the ground. She folded the letter one more time and tucked it into the pocket of her apron, close to her heart where it would stay. Trust no one, the letter said. Kate looked out at Frank, weathered and loyal after all these years. She looked at Wade Calloway, a stranger with careful eyes and careless hands. She looked last of all toward the barn. We'll see about that, she murmured, and went to start the coffee, because whatever was coming for Whispering Pines Ranch, she intended to meet it wide awake. 3 days passed before Kate let herself breathe easy, and even then, it wasn't easy at all. She kept Ethelgard in the back stall, the one with no window, and she fed him after dark, when Wade Calloway had ridden off toward whatever line shack he was sleeping in that night. Frank watched the roads. Kate watched Wade. Nobody watched the sky, which was maybe the first mistake, because it was the sky that gave them away. Storm's coming back, Frank said on the 4th morning, squinting up at clouds stacking heavy over the ridge. Bad one by the look of it. We've had storms before, not with a horse in the barn that puts his hoof down like he's trying to tell you something. Frank spat off to the side. You seen him do it again last night? Kate had. She hadn't told Frank the whole of it because the whole of it didn't make sense, even inside her own head, and she wasn't ready to say it out loud and watch Frank's face tell her she'd lost her mind grieving Daniel. He stomps when he's nervous, she said. That's all it is. That ain't all it is, and you know it. She did know it. She just wasn't ready. That night, with the wind starting to pick up again, and lightning walking the far ridgeline in slow, silent flashes, Kate carried a lantern out to the barn the way she had every night since Ethelgard arrived, and she found him already awake, ears pricked, body rigid with a tension that had nothing to do with storms. What is it? She whispered, setting the lantern on the hook. What's got you? He stomped. Once hard, and then again 3 more times in a pattern too deliberate to be random, and Kate felt the hair rise on her arms because she'd counted this same pattern the night before, and the night before that, always at the same place, always right before the ground itself seemed to answer with a low tremor. She felt more than heard. You're not scared, she said slowly. You're listening to something. Ethelgard turned his head and looked at her, and in the lantern light his eye held something that wasn't animal fear at all. It was closer to urgency, closer to warning. Kate knelt down in the straw and pressed her palm flat against the packed dirt floor, the way she'd seen old-timers do to listen for cattle stampeding miles off, and she felt it faint, rhythmic, coming up through the earth like something enormous breathing far below the ground. Sweet Jesus, she breathed. The barn door banged open behind her, and she spun, hand flying to the shotgun leaned against the stall, but it was only Frank, rifle in hand, rain-soaked from the porch where he must have been keeping watch. "You feel that?" he said, breathless. "Ground's moving." "I feel it." Kate stood, legs unsteady. Frank, he knew. Before it started, he knew it was coming. He does this every night, same pattern, right before. A deeper tremor rolled through, strong enough to rattle the tack hanging on the wall, strong enough that Ethelgard threw his head and screamed a sound unlike any horse cry Kate had ever heard, high and strange and almost mournful. Then it stopped. The ground went still. The tack stopped swinging. Silence except for rain on the roof, and Ethelgard's ragged breathing settling slow. "That wasn't thunder," Frank said quietly. "No." Kate's voice came out thin. "That wasn't thunder."
GSM yet.
By morning, the tremor was already ranch gossip carried down the road by riders who'd felt it in their own beds 10 miles off, and Kate knew that meant Victor Sen would hear of it too if he hadn't already. She found Wade at the pump before sunup, splashing water over his face. And something in the careful way he straightened when he saw her told Kate he'd been waiting for her, not the other way around. "You felt it too," he said. Not a question. Whole county felt it. Whole county didn't watch their barn horse call it before it happened. Wade wiped his face dry with his sleeve, eyes steady on hers, and Kate's stomach dropped straight through the ground that had shaken the night before. "I heard him. Through the wall of the bunkhouse, stomping that same pattern 3 nights running." Kate's hand drifted toward the knife she kept in her boot, an old habit from before Daniel and Wade caught the motion, and held up both palms slow and easy, the same gesture he'd used the morning he first rode up. "I'm not here to hurt you, Kate, or him." "Then what are you here for, Mr. Calloway? Because a man who fixes fences for breakfast doesn't usually lie awake counting a horse's footsteps." Wade was quiet a long moment, jaw working like a man deciding how much rope to give a truth he'd been keeping tied down. "I used to work for Apex," he said finally. The words landed like a slap. Kate's hand found the knife hilt, for real this time. "Used to," Wade said quickly, seeing her face. "Past tense, Kate. I left 8 months back after I saw what they were doing to land they claimed was worthless. I've been drifting since, doing honest work where I can find it, staying clear of the company roads." He held her gaze unflinching. "I didn't come here looking for that horse. I swear that on my mother's grave. But I know enough about Apex's projects to recognize what he's doing when he stomps that pattern, and it scared the hell out of me if you want the truth." "What is he doing?" Kate's voice had gone flat dangerous. "He's mapping." "Mapping what?" "I don't know exactly. Seismic activity, maybe. Ground density. Something underneath this land that Apex wants bad enough to send men asking questions at every ranch within 20 miles. Wade's jaw tightened. "I heard the name Ethelgard before Kate, whispered back when I still worked for them. Project designation, not a proper name. E7. Kate felt the world tilt sideways. "Project E7, she repeated. "I don't know the whole of it. I swear I don't. But I know it was Dr. Lila Jennings's work before she disappeared off the company rolls without a word to anybody. And I know Victor Sen tore that research facility apart, looking for something she took with her when she went." Wade stepped closer, voice dropping. "Kate, if that horse in your barn is what I think he is, you are sitting on the most valuable thing Apex Consortium has lost in 5 years, and Victor Sen does not stop looking for valuable things." Kate's mind raced back to the letter, to the words that hadn't made sense that first storming night. "He is not broken. He is a key, not a metaphor, not grief-addled fancy. A literal truth she hadn't been ready to hear." "Lila Jennings," Kate said slowly. "She's real and missing. And if she's the one who left that letter, she trusted you with something she was willing to risk her life to protect." Wade held her eyes. "That's not nothing, Kate. That's not a small thing to be trusted with." Kate looked back toward the barn, toward Ethelgard's dark shape, just visible through the open door, and for the first time since that storming night, she felt something other than fear settle into her chest. something closer to purpose. "Why are you telling me this?" she said. "You could have stayed quiet. Kept fixing fences, kept your secret ridden off whenever this got too hot." Wade's expression cracked just slightly into something raw and tired. "Because I've spent 8 months running from what I saw at Apex, and every morning I wake up feeling like a coward for not doing something about it. I don't intend to run from this too." Kate studied him a long moment, rain-damp and honest in the gray morning light, and made a decision she hoped to God she wouldn't regret. "All right," she said. "You want to help, then help. But you lie to me once, Wade Calloway, just once, and I'll put a bullet in you myself and let Frank dig the hole." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "Fair enough, ma'am." That afternoon, with Wade's help, Kate did something she hadn't dared try before she let Ethelgard out into the small paddock behind the barn, shielded from the road by a stand of cottonwoods, and she watched what he did with open ground beneath his hooves. He didn't graze. He didn't run. He walked in slow, deliberate lines, head low, and every few steps he struck the ground once with his forehoof hard and paused as if listening. "He's testing it," Wade said quietly, standing beside her at the fence rail. "Section by section. Like he's building a picture." "A picture of what?" "I don't know, but look." Wade pointed. "He's not wandering random. He keeps coming back to that same low spot there by the dead oak stump. Every pass." Kate watched, and sure enough, Ethelgard circled back to the same 20 feet of ground 3 times, striking harder each time his ears pinned flat, with what looked almost like frustration. "Something's under there," Kate murmured. "Something he doesn't like the feel of." Frank came around the barn corner just then, wiping his hands on a rag, and stopped dead at the sight of the horse's strange, slow circuit. "What in the hell is he doing?" "Working," Kate said. "Working at what?" "We're not sure yet." Kate kept her eyes on Ethelgard. "But I mean to find out." She fetched a shovel from the tool shed and walked out to the dead oak stump herself, ignoring Frank's protest and Wade's sharp look of caution, and drove the blade into the soft earth right where Ethelgard had struck hardest. 3 feet down the shovel, hit something that wasn't rock and wasn't root, something with a hollow metallic ring that sent a chill straight up Kate's arm. "Kate." Wade's voice had gone tight. Kate stepped back from there. "Why?" "Because if that's what I think it is, it's a survey marker, company issue, buried deep enough that nobody was supposed to find it by accident." Wade's face had gone pale under his tan. "Which means Apex already mapped this ground once a long time ago, and buried the proof so nobody else would find it first." Kate straightened shovel in hand, understanding dawning cold and slow. "They know what's under my land. They've known for years probably. And if Ethelgard's confirming it, tapping the same spots their old survey marked, then he's not just mapping something new," Kate finished. "He's checking their work." The 3 of them stood in silence a moment, rain starting to spit again from clouds still heavy overhead, and in the paddock, Ethelgard lifted his head and looked straight at Kate, dark eyes steady, like he'd been waiting for her to understand. "We need Lila Jennings," Kate said finally. "We need to find her before Sen does." "That's easier said than done," Wade said. "She's been off the map for months. Then we start asking around, quiet-like. Somebody in this county's seen something." Kate's jaw set the same stubborn set Frank had accused her of carrying straight from her husband. "This is my land, my horse, and my fight now, whether I like it or not. I don't intend to wait around for Victor Sen to come collect what he thinks belongs to him." Word came 2 days later, carried by the Ashworth boy, on a lathered horse, that a stranger had been asking after Kate Holloway by name in town. Tall man, expensive coat, city boots, that had never touched a cow pasture in their life. "Description fits a company man," Frank said, grimly, standing in Kate's kitchen, with his hat crushed in both fists. "Not Sen himself, but close enough to be trouble." "What did he ask?" "Whether you'd taken in any new stock recent. Whether you had visitors." Frank's mouth twisted. "Ashworth's boy is sharp. Told him nothing on account of Ashworth's boy actually not knowing nothing, thank God. But he won't be the last one, asked Kate. Word travels. Kate felt her chest tighten with something between fear and fury. Let them ask. Ain't a soul in this county owes Victor Sen a favor. Ain't a soul in this county wants to end up like the Cutter place either, Frank shot back. Fear buys silence for a while, Kate, but it don't buy it forever. Somebody's going to talk sooner or later, whether out of spite or money or just plain scared. Kate knew he was right, and the knowing sat heavy in her stomach. That evening, with the sky finally clearing after days of rolling storms, Wade found her sitting on the porch step staring out at the barn, like she could will the danger away by watching hard enough. Mind some company, he asked. Suit yourself. He sat careful to leave a respectable distance between them, hat in his hands, and for a long moment neither of them said anything at all. You're thinking about your husband, Wade said finally. Kate's head snapped toward him, surprised. What makes you say that? The way you're sitting, like you're carrying something heavy and don't want anybody to see the weight of it. Wade turned his hat over once in his hands. I lost my brother few years back. Recognize the posture. Something in Kate's chest cracked open just a little at the plain honesty of it. Daniel died 2 summers ago. Fever, not violence, not anything I could have fought against. Just gone over the course of 11 days, and I woke up the 12th morning a widow with a mortgage and no earthly idea how to run a ranch alone. But you did it anyway. Didn't have much choice. Kate looked out at the darkening fields. Some nights I still reach for him before I remember. Still talk to him in my head like he's going to answer back. She let out a short, humorless laugh. Now I'm talking to a horse instead. Suppose that's progress in its own strange way. Wade was quiet a moment, watching her with something gentle in his tired eyes. For what it's worth, Kate, I don't think you're foolish for trusting that horse. I think you're about the only person left in this county with sense enough to see what's standing right in front of you. Kate looked over at him, something warm and unfamiliar stirring beneath the grief she'd carried so long it had become part of her skin. You've got a strange way of paying compliments, Mr. Calloway. Never claimed to be smooth. A real smile this time, brief but genuine. Just honest. They sat together as the last light faded, and out in the paddock, Ethelgard grazed easy for the first time in days, as if some tension in the ground itself had finally settled. It didn't stay settled long. 3 nights later, Kate woke to Frank pounding on her bedroom door, voice tight with a fear she'd never heard from him before. Riders, he said the second she opened the door. Company riders, 4 of them coming up the main road. They ain't hiding it, Kate. They're coming straight for the house. Kate's heart slammed against her ribs. How long? 10 minutes, maybe less. Get Wade. Get the horse into the deep hollow behind the north ridge, the one nobody but us knows about. Now, Frank, go. She dressed in the dark, hands shaking as she buttoned her shirt, and by the time she stepped onto the porch with the shotgun in her hands, 4 riders were already visible at the edge of the yard, lanterns swinging, faces hard and unfriendly in the flickering light. The lead rider reined in at a respectful distance, respectful in appearance. Only. Kate noted the kind of careful courtesy that masked something colder underneath. Mrs. Holloway, he said, tipping his hat with mocking precision. Apologies for the late hour. My name is Reeves. I represent the Apex Consortium. It's the middle of the night, Mr. Reeves. Whatever you're representing can wait for daylight. I'm afraid it can't. Reeves's smile didn't reach his eyes. We've had reports of unusual livestock activity in this vicinity. Seismic disturbances coinciding suspiciously with reports of a large roan horse acquired recently by your ranch. Kate's blood went cold, but she kept her face steady, kept the shotgun loose and easy in her grip, the way Daniel had taught her years back, aimed at nothing in particular, but ready all the same. I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Reeves. I haven't acquired any new stock. No. Reeves's eyes drifted past her toward the dark shape of the barn. Would you object to my men taking a look around then? Purely routine. We compensate ranchers generously for their cooperation. I would object very much, Kate said. This is private property, and it's the middle of the night, and you don't have so much as a scrap of paper giving you the right to set foot past that fence line." Reeves's smile thinned, the pleasant mask slipping just enough to show something harder underneath. "I'd hate for this to become unpleasant, Mrs. Holloway." "So would I. Which is why you and your men are going to turn around and ride back the way you came." For a long, taut moment, nobody moved. Kate could hear her own heartbeat, could hear one of the company riders shift uneasy in his saddle, could feel the whole night balanced on a knife's edge. Then Reeves inclined his head, slow and deliberate. "Of course, we wouldn't want to trespass." He gathered his reins. "But Mrs. Holloway, Mr. Sen, takes a personal interest in matters of missing company property. I'd advise you to consider your position carefully. He is not a patient man, and he does not forget a debt." "I don't owe Victor Sen a thing. We'll see about that." Reeves tipped his hat once more, mocking and precise, and wheeled his horse around the other three riders falling in behind him as they retreated back down the dark road. Kate stood on the porch long after the sound of hooves had faded, shotgun still gripped tight, chest heaving with the aftermath of adrenaline and fury both. Frank emerged from the shadows near the barn a few minutes later, breathing hard from the run to the North Ridge and back. "Horse is hidden. What happened?" "They know," Kate said, voice shaking now that the danger had passed and left room for the fear to catch up. "They know he's here, Frank. That was a warning, not a request." "Then we're out of time." Kate turned toward him, toward the barn, toward the whole weight of what she'd taken on the night that letter appeared nailed to a stall door. "No," she said. "We're just getting started." Wade found her an hour later, still awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a map of the county spread out before her, Daniel's old compass sitting heavy in her palm. "You should sleep," he said. "Can't. Not with Sen's man standing on my porch not an hour past threatening me pretty as you please and smiling the whole time he did it." Kate didn't look up from the map. "I need to find Lila Jennings Wade. Before they do. She's the only one who can tell us what Ethelgard really is, what he's really mapping, and why it matters enough for a man like Sen to send riders in the dead of night." Wade pulled out the chair across from her and sat studying the map upside down. "I might know a place to start." Kate's head came up sharp. "What place?" "There's an old mining survey office abandoned now out past Widowmaker Canyon. Apex used it years back before they built their main facility in town. If Lila took anything with her when she ran records notes, anything, that's the kind of place she might have hidden it. Off the books. Somewhere Sen wouldn't think to look because officially it doesn't exist anymore." "How do you know about it?" Wade's jaw tightened, old guilt surfacing plain on his face. "Because I helped decommission it back when I still worked for them. Sealed the records room myself on Sen's orders, never asked why." Kate studied him a long moment, weighing trust against the very real danger of being wrong about a man twice now. But she thought of the letter, of Ethelgard's steady dark eyes, of the way Wade had told her the truth about Apex, without her having to drag it out of him. "Widowmaker Canyon," she said finally. "That's a 2-day ride. Through rough country. And if Sen's already got men watching the roads, it's dangerous country besides. Everything about this is dangerous now, Wade. I don't see that we've got much choice left." Kate rolled the map, closed the decision settling into her chest like something solid. "We leave at first light. You, me, and Frank stays here to watch the ranch and keep Ethelgard hidden in the North Hollow till we're back. Frank's not gonna like being left behind. Frank doesn't have to like it. He just has to do it." Kate stood, weariness and resolve fighting for space in her tired bones. "I need someone I trust watching this land while I'm gone, and much as it costs me to say it, Wade, I've only known you 2 weeks." Something flickered across Wade's face, hurt maybe, or just honest acknowledgement. "That's fair, Kate. I'd feel the same in your boots." She almost softened the words, almost told him she trusted him more than that already, more than she probably should, this soon after everything. But she held it back because grief had taught her caution even when her heart wanted to run ahead of good sense, and she wasn't ready yet to hand that particular truth over to a man she'd known barely a fortnight. "Get some rest," she said instead. "We ride hard tomorrow." Dawn broke clear and cold, the storms finally spent, and Kate stood at the mouth of the North Hollow, with her hand pressed flat against Ethelgard's warm neck, feeling the steady thrum of his pulse beneath her palm. "You stay hidden," she told him softly. "You stay quiet, and you trust Frank, and I'll be back before you know it with answers, I promise you that." Ethelgard nuzzled against her shoulder, gentle, despite his size, and Kate felt something in her chest ache with an affection that had crept up on her unnoticed over these strange, storm-racked weeks. "Whatever you are," she whispered, "I'm glad you picked my barn." Behind her, Wade waited with the horses saddled and ready saddlebags packed with what provisions they could spare, and Frank stood at the hollow's edge with his rifle across his arm and worry carved deep into every line of his weathered face. "You be careful out there," Frank said. "Both of you. Widowmaker Canyon didn't earn that name for nothing." "We'll be careful," Kate said. "And Kate." Frank caught her arm before she could mount up his grip tight, urgent. "If anything happens to you out there, I'll never forgive myself for letting you ride off on this fool's errand." Kate softened, covering his weathered hand with her own. "Nothing's going to happen, Frank. I've got too much left to protect around here to go and get myself killed over a mining office." "See that you remember that." She mounted up, gathered her reins, and looked one last time toward the hollow where Ethelgard stood watching her go, his dark eyes steady and knowing in the pale morning light. Then she turned her horse toward Widowmaker Canyon, toward whatever truth waited in that abandoned survey office, and toward a danger she was only beginning to understand the shape of. Wade fell in beside her, quiet and steady, and together they rode out from Whispering Pines Ranch into a morning that felt for the first time in weeks like the calm stretched thin before something far worse broke loose. Neither of them spoke for the first hour of riding, the county falling away behind them in long stretches of scrub grass and broken fence line, until Wade finally broke the silence with a question that had clearly been sitting on him since dawn. "Why'd you really bring me along, Kate? You could have made this ride alone easy enough, tough as you are." Kate considered the question a long moment, hooves drumming steady beneath them. "Because you know that survey office. Because you know Apex's ways better than I ever could. And because—" She hesitated, then pushed the honesty out anyway. "Because for all my doubting, some part of me does trust you, Wade Calloway. I just haven't decided yet how much." A faint, tired smile touched his mouth. "Fair enough, ma'am. Guess I'll take that as progress. Don't get used to it. Wouldn't dream of it." They rode on the canyon country, rising rough and jagged on the horizon ahead, and somewhere behind them, miles back at Whispering Pines, Ethelgard lifted his head in the hollow and struck the ground 3 times hard, before falling still and silent beneath a sky finally clear of storms, as if some deeper trouble patient and waiting had only just begun to stir. The canyon country swallowed them whole by mid-afternoon rock walls climbing steep on either side of the trail, and Kate felt the weight of the errand pressing harder on her chest with every mile that put distance between her and the ranch. "How much farther?" she asked. "Another hour, maybe less if the old trail's still passable." Wade scanned the ridgeline above them, eyes narrowed against the sun. "We'll want to be careful from here on. This close to Widowmaker Sound carries strange. Voices bounce off these walls further than you'd think." Kate lowered her voice without quite meaning to. "You think Sen's got men out here already?" "I think a man like Sen doesn't leave anything to chance, especially not something he's spent this long looking for." Wade's jaw tightened. "Keep your eyes on the ridge lines. Anybody watching would post up high." They rode on in tense quiet, and Kate found herself scanning every outcrop and shadow with a wariness that made her hands ache from gripping the reins too tight. It was nearly an hour later, just as the canyon walls began to narrow toward a break in the rock, that Wade suddenly reined up hard, one hand shooting out to grab Kate's bridle and stop her horse dead. "Wade, what?" Quiet. His voice had dropped to barely a whisper. "Look there. Base of that ridge." Kate followed his gaze and felt her stomach drop. 2 horses saddled and tethered in the shade of an overhang tack, polished and expensive, in a way that no honest rancher's gear ever was. "Company men," she breathed. "Has to be. And if their horses are here, they're on foot somewhere close." Wade's hand went to the rifle in his saddle scabbard. "We need to go around." There's a game trail that cuts up over the ridge rough, but passable comes down the far side near the survey office. It'll cost us an hour, but it keeps us clear of whoever's down here. Let's move. They cut off the main trail, picking their way up a narrow game path that climbed sharp through loose scree, and Kate's heart hammered with every clatter of stone beneath her horse's hooves, certain each sound would bring riflemen swarming up from below. But the climb passed without incident, and by the time they crested the ridge and started down the far side, the tension in Kate's shoulders had eased into something more manageable. "There," Wade said, pointing. Below them, half swallowed by scrub brush and years of neglect, sat a squat stone building with a collapsed section of roof and windows, boarded over with weathered planks. It looked abandoned, in truth, the kind of forgotten place nobody would think twice about, which Kate supposed was exactly the point. That's it. That's it. Old survey office company records mostly before Apex built the main facility in town. Wade started his horse down the slope. "Come on. Best we get in and out quick." "Destrope." The door hung loose on one hinge, and inside, dust lay thick over everything. Overturned filing cabinets, papers scattered and yellowed with age, the whole place smelling of mildew and long abandonment. Kate stepped carefully, lantern held high, while Wade moved to the back corner, where a section of floorboard looked subtly different from the rest. "Here," he said, kneeling. "This is where we sealed the records room. If Lila hid anything, it'd be down there." He pried at the boards with a small crowbar he'd carried in his saddlebag, and after a few minutes of straining, one board gave way with a splintering crack, revealing a narrow crawlspace beneath. "I'll go," Kate said. "Kate, it could be—" "I'm smaller than you, Wade, and we don't have time to argue about it." She was already lowering the lantern down into the dark space, before he could object further, and she dropped down after it boots, hitting packed earth with a soft thud. The crawl space was cramped, barely tall enough to crouch in. But a few feet in, she found what she was looking for, a small metal strongbox, half buried in dirt, with a name scratched crudely into the lid. L. Jennings. "Wade!" Kate called up, voice tight with excitement. "I found something!" She dragged the box back to the opening and passed it up into Wade's waiting hands, before climbing out herself, dirt-streaked and breathless. Wade had already set the box on the old desk and was working at the rusted latch with his knife when Kate joined him. "Careful," she said. "I'm being careful." The latch gave with a sharp snap, and Wade lifted the lid. Inside lay a stack of papers, water-stained but legible, and on top a leather-bound journal with initials embossed on the cover, L.J. Kate lifted it out with trembling hands and opened to the first page. "If you're reading this, I'm already dead or worse. My name is Lila Jennings, and what I discovered at Apex Consortium is going to destroy a lot of powerful men if the right person ever finds it." "Sweet Jesus," Kate whispered. She flipped forward, scanning quickly, and the more she read, the colder the blood ran in her veins. Diagrams, genetic markers, references to something called Project E7 repeated over and over alongside notations Kate couldn't fully parse, but understood the shape of well enough to feel sick. "Wade, look at this." He leaned over her shoulder, reading fast, and his face went pale under his tan. "Kate, this isn't just a horse. I know that. I've known that since the night he stomped that pattern into my barn floor." Kate's hands shook as she turned another page. "But this, Wade, this says he was bred. Engineered. Some kind of biological instrument they built to detect seismic instability mineral deposits. God knows what else all wrapped up inside a living horse, because a machine would have drawn too much attention out here. Why would they need something like that?" Kate turned another page, and the answer sat there in Lila Jennings's own frantic handwriting, underlined twice. They found lithium. Or they thought they did. Enough to make Apex the wealthiest company in the territory if the deposit is real. But the geological surveys keep coming back inconsistent. E7 was supposed to settle it once and for all, confirm the deposit, pinpoint its exact boundaries. Except something's wrong with the data. Something the company doesn't want questioned because too much money's already been promised to investors. They lied, Kate said slowly. About what's under this land. Or they don't know themselves and they're too deep in to admit it. Wade's voice had gone hard. Kate, if Ethelgard's readings are contradicting Apex's own surveys, that's not just an inconvenience to them. That's the difference between Sen being the richest man in the territory and Sen being ruined. Kate closed the journal slowly, understanding settling into her chest heavy as stone. That's why they want him back so bad. Not because he's valuable. Because he might be the only thing that can prove they're wrong or prove they've been lying. Both maybe. A sound outside boots on gravel, low voices, froze them both where they stood. Someone's here, Kate breathed. Wade was already moving, blowing out the lantern, pressing Kate back into the shadow of an overturned cabinet, with one arm firm across her front. Through a gap in the boarded window, Kate caught sight of two men in expensive coats, picking their way toward the survey office, rifles held ready. They tracked us, she whispered. Or they were already watching this place. Either way. Wade's eyes swept the room, searching for an exit that wasn't the front door. There. Back window boarded but loose. We go now, quiet before they're inside. Kate shoved the journal and papers into her satchel hands, shaking, and followed Wade toward the back of the building. The boards gave way easier than she expected, and they slipped out into the brush just as the front door creaked open behind them. Check the back room, a voice said, muffled through the walls. Somebody's been in here recent. Dust's disturbed. Kate's heart hammered as she and Wade crept low through the scrub, angling back toward where they'd left the horses, every snap of a twig underfoot sounding thunderous in her own ears. They'd almost made it clear when a shout went up behind them. Their movement west side. Run, Wade said, and they broke into a full sprint through the brush branches, tearing at Kate's sleeves, gunfire cracking behind them and kicking up dirt just feet from her boots. They reached the horses in a chaos of scrambling and mounting, and Kate barely had her boot in the stirrup before Wade slapped her horse's flank and sent it lurching forward into a dead run, the two of them tearing back up the ridge trail with bullets whining past close enough to hear. Tiam. They didn't stop running until the canyon walls had swallowed the sound of pursuit entirely, and even then, Kate's heart didn't slow for what felt like miles, her whole body shaking with the aftermath of terror and adrenaline both. You all right? Wade called, reining in finally in a stand of cottonwoods beside a thin creek. I'm alive. Kate's voice came out unsteady. Which is more than I expected an hour ago. You did good back there. Kept your head. Didn't feel like I had much choice. Kate dismounted, legs weak beneath her, and pressed a hand to the satchel at her hip, where Lila Jennings' journal sat heavy with truth that could burn the whole territory down. Wade, we have to get this back to the ranch. If Sen's men are already out here searching, they know we're onto something. It's only a matter of time before they connect it back to Whispering Pines. I know. Wade's face was grim. We ride through the night, no stopping, through Widowmaker Canyon in the dark. It's that, or wait for daylight and risk them catching up to us on open ground. I don't love either option, Kate, but I trust the canyon less crowded with enemies than the flat country beyond it. Kate nodded, swallowing her exhaustion, and remounted despite the ache already settling deep into her muscles. Then we ride. The night passed in a blur of exhaustion and fear, the two of them picking their way through canyon trails by starlight, stopping only when the horses needed rest, saying little because there was little breath left to spare on conversation. By the time dawn broke gray and cold over the eastern ridges, Kate was swaying in the saddle, held upright by stubbornness alone. Not much farther, Wade said, voice hoarse. Ranch is just past that rise. Kate nodded, too tired to answer in words, and they crested the final hill as the sun broke fully over the horizon and found the yard at Whispering Pines Ranch full of riders. No, Kate breathed, kicking her exhausted horse into a final desperate run down the slope. No, no, no. Frank stood on the porch, rifle raised, facing down 4 company men on horseback, Reeves at their head with that same cold, pleasant smile fixed on his face. And behind them in the open yard, where he should never have been visible from the road, stood Ethelgard, no longer hidden in the north hollow, but tethered plain as day, to the hitching post, his coat lathered with the look of a horse that had fought hard against restraint. "Frank!" Kate shouted, reining in hard enough that her horse skidded in the dirt. "Frank, what happened?" "They came at dawn." Frank called back, not taking his eyes off Reeves. "Horse got spooked in the hollow, some kind of tremor broke loose and ran for the barn before I could stop him. They were already on the property by the time I got him settled." Reeves turned his cold smile toward Kate, dismounting his horse with unhurried precision. "Mrs. Holloway, how fortunate you've returned. Saves us the trouble of waiting. You're trespassing, Mr. Reeves. I'm collecting company property." Reeves's eyes flicked toward Ethelgard's satisfaction plain on his face. "Project E7 belongs to Apex Consortium, Mrs. Holloway. It always has. Whatever fantasy you've constructed about rescuing some innocent stray animal, I'm afraid it ends here." "He's not property," Kate said, dismounting, despite her exhaustion planting herself between Reeves and the horse with a fierceness that surprised even her. "He's not a machine, Mr. Reeves, whatever your company built him to be. He's alive and he came to me, and I don't intend to hand him over without a fight." "That's very noble, Mrs. Holloway. It's also legally irrelevant." Reeves's smile sharpened. "Mr. Sen has already secured the appropriate paperwork with the territorial marshal. Resisting further will only result in charges against you, theft of company assets at minimum. Perhaps more given the circumstances." Kate's blood ran cold, but she held her ground. "What circumstances?" Reeves's smile widened cruel now beneath its polished veneer. "2 of my men were fired upon yesterday, Mrs. Holloway, near an old survey office in Widowmaker Canyon. I understand you and your companion were seen fleeing the scene." His eyes flicked to Wade, cold recognition dawning. "Mr. Calloway, I wondered when you'd resurface." Wade's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "You're welcome to add attempted theft of confidential company documents to the list of charges if you'd like." Reeves continued smoothly. "Though I suspect Mr. Sen would prefer a quieter resolution. He does so hate unnecessary publicity." Kate's mind raced terror and fury, warring for control, and it was Frank's voice that cut through the standoff, steady and hard as iron. "You touch that horse, Reeves, and you'll answer to more than paperwork." Reeves glanced at the old foreman's rifle, still raised and steady, despite his age, and something calculating shifted behind his eyes. "There's no need for violence, gentlemen. I'm simply here to retrieve property." "He's not leaving," Kate said, voice shaking now with something that had passed beyond fear into pure defiance. "Not without a fight you won't want the whole county hearing about." For a long, brittle moment, nobody moved. Then Reeves's smile faded into something colder, more calculating. "Very well, Mrs. Holloway. I'll relay your position to Mr. Sen personally." He remounted his horse with unhurried precision. "But I'd advise you to reconsider your defiance before he arrives himself. Mr. Sen does not send subordinates to handle matters he considers truly important." His eyes swept once more toward Ethelgard, hungry and possessive. "And I assure you, Mrs. Holloway, this has become very important indeed." He wheeled his horse and led his men back down the drive, leaving Kate standing in the yard with her heart hammering and her legs threatening to give out from exhaustion and terror both. The moment they were out of sight, Frank lowered his rifle and rushed to her side. "Kate, you look half dead. What happened out there?" "Later," Kate said, swaying. "Wade the journal." "I've got it safe," Wade said, catching her arm as her knees finally buckled. "Kate, you need to rest. We both do." "There's no time to rest," Kate said, even as darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. "Sen's coming himself now. We have to be ready." "We will be," Wade said, steadying her. "But you won't be any use to Ethelgard or anybody else if you collapse in this yard from exhaustion. Rest first. Fight after." Kate wanted to argue, wanted to insist there was no time. But her body betrayed her, the accumulated weight of days without proper sleep finally dragging her under, and the last thing she registered before darkness took her was Ethelgard's low, worried whinny carrying across the yard, and Wade's arms steady and sure, catching her before she hit the ground. She woke hours later in her own bed, sunlight slanting long and gold through the window, and for one disoriented moment, she thought the whole nightmare had been some fevered dream. Then she saw Frank sitting in the chair beside her bed journal open in his lap, reading by the last of the afternoon light, and the truth of everything came crashing back. "You're awake," Frank said, setting the journal aside. "Good. You had us worried." "How long was I out?" "Better part of the day. Wade said you rode through the whole night without stopping. Man's got some sense at least insisting you rest before you keeled over for good." Frank's weathered face was drawn tight with worry. "I read through some of this journal while you slept, Kate. Lord help us. I don't know that I understood half of it, but what I did understand is enough to know we're in more trouble than we thought." Kate finished sitting up, despite the protest of exhausted muscles. "That horse isn't just valuable, Kate. He's dangerous to men like Sen in ways that go beyond money. If what this journal says is true, if Apex has been lying to their own investors about what's really under this land, then Ethelgard is the only proof that could bring the whole company down." Kate swung her legs off the bed, forcing herself upright despite the dizziness that swept through her. "Which means Sen isn't just going to send men to collect property anymore. He's going to come here himself, and he's going to make sure whatever proof exists disappears along with him." Frank's face had gone gray. "Kate, that's not a fight we can win. Not against a man with Sen's money and Sen's men, maybe not straight on." Kate reached for her boots, mind already racing ahead despite her body's exhaustion. "But we don't have to win straight on Frank. We just have to make sure the truth gets out before he can bury it, and us along with it." Wade appeared in the doorway just then, having clearly heard the tail end of the conversation, his own face lined with the same exhaustion Kate felt in her bones. "Kate, there's something else you should know. Something I found in the journal while you were sleeping." "What?" Wade's expression was grim. "Lila Jennings didn't just document the lie about the lithium deposit. She documented who ordered her to falsify the original surveys." He paused, and Kate saw real dread in his eyes. "It was Sen himself, Kate. Direct orders, his signature on internal memos, demanding the numbers be adjusted to attract investors. If this journal ever reaches the territorial marshal, or worse, the newspapers, it's not just company embarrassment anymore." Kate finished understanding, dawning cold and heavy. "It's fraud. Real crime with Sen's own signature proving it." "Which means he's not coming here to negotiate," Wade said quietly. "He's coming here to make sure that journal and everyone who's read it never has the chance to talk." The room went silent, the weight of the truth settling over all three of them like a shroud. Outside, Kate could hear Ethelgard shifting restless in the paddock, as if he too sensed the danger gathering on the horizon, closing in with every hour that passed. "Then we don't wait for him to come to us," Kate said finally, voice steady despite the fear churning in her chest. "We take this journal to the territorial marshal ourselves tonight, before Sen even knows we're moving. Kate, the marshal's office is 2 hours' ride through open country. If Sen's men are watching the roads, then we find a way around them." Kate stood, exhaustion burning away beneath a fierce, desperate resolve. "I didn't ride through Widowmaker Canyon and nearly get shot for this journal just to sit here and wait for Victor Sen to burn my ranch down around us. We move tonight." Frank and Wade exchanged a long look, and Kate saw the same fear reflected in both their faces. Fear not just for themselves, but for her, for the danger she was about to walk straight into with eyes wide open. "All right," Frank said finally, hefting his rifle. "Then we move tonight, all of us." Kate nodded, gratitude and terror twisting together in her chest, and moved to the window to look out at Ethelgard one last time before the night ahead swallowed them whole. He stood in the paddock, dark and steady in the fading light, and when he lifted his head and met her eyes through the glass, Kate felt something settle in her chest. Not peace, not exactly, but purpose, solid and unshakable. "Whatever happens tonight," she murmured, "I'm not letting them take you. Not without a fight that the whole territory hears about." Behind her, Wade began gathering supplies with quiet, efficient urgency, and Frank checked his rifle one final time, and outside the window, the sun sank lower toward the ridgeline, gold fading to the deep bruised purple of a summer evening, about to give way to the most dangerous night Whispering Pines Ranch had faced since the day Kate buried her husband beneath its soil. The ride to the marshal's office would take them straight past the old Cutter place, straight through open country where Sen's riders had already been spotted twice, and straight into a night that Kate suspected would decide everything: her ranch, her freedom, and the strange, fierce, impossible loyalty that had grown between her and a horse who was so much more than anyone had ever meant him to be. Kate mounted up with the journal secured tight against her ribs, wrapped in oilcloth and buttoned inside her shirt, where no stray bullet or grasping hand could easily reach it, and by the time the three of them cleared the ranch gate, the sky had gone full dark, stars, sharp and cold overhead. "Stay off the main road," Wade said, voice low. "There's a cattle trail runs parallel rougher going, but it'll keep us out of sight from anybody watching the highway." "You know this country that well?" Frank asked, suspicion still lingering under the words even now. "Well enough to keep us alive tonight, Frank. That's what matters." They rode hard and quiet, the only sounds the creak of leather and the steady drum of hooves against packed earth, and Kate kept one hand pressed against her chest, where the journal sat heavy with truth that could either save them all or get them killed trying to deliver it. They were perhaps an hour out, cutting through a shallow draw that Wade swore would save them 20 minutes, when Kate's horse suddenly threw its head and shied hard sideways, nearly unseating her. "Whoa, easy!" She fought the animal back under control, heart hammering. "What spooked him?" "Kate." Frank's voice had gone tight, urgent. "Look!" Ahead of them, where the draw opened, back onto flat ground. Lantern light bobbed in the darkness. 3, 4, 5 points of light, moving with the deliberate pattern of men on horseback, fanning out to block a trail. "They're waiting for us," Wade breathed. "Howie told no one which route. Reeves isn't a fool, Kate. He'd have posted men on every road out of Whispering Pines the second he rode off this morning." Wade wheeled his horse around. "We can't go through. We double back, find another way." A rifle shot cracked through the night close enough that Kate felt the wind of it, and her horse screamed and reared. "Down!" Frank shouted. "Everybody down!" Kate threw herself from the saddle, hitting the ground hard enough to knock the breath from her lungs, and scrambled behind a low outcrop of rock as more shots rang out, muzzle flashes strobing in the darkness ahead. Wade and Frank dove for cover beside her, and for a long, terrifying moment, the only sound was gunfire and her own ragged breathing. "We're pinned," Wade said, breathless. "Kate, the journal, if they take that from us, everything we risked is for nothing." "I know that." Kate's hands shook as she pressed herself flatter against the rock. "What do we do?" "There's a wash 40 yards back the way we came. Drops down into a gully that connects to the canyon trail. If we can get to it, we'll be exposed the whole way." "We're exposed here too, Kate, and here we're outnumbered 5-3 with our backs against open ground." Wade's jaw was set hard. "I'll draw their fire. You and Frank make for the wash." "Like hell you will," Kate snapped. "We go together or we don't go at all." Before Wade could argue further, a new sound cut through the chaos, hoofbeats fast and heavy, coming from behind them. And for one horrifying second, Kate thought Sen had flanked them entirely. Then a massive dark shape burst out of the night at a dead run, screaming a challenge that raised the hair on Kate's arms, and she realized with disbelief that it was Ethelgard broken loose from the ranch, running straight into gunfire like nothing on earth could stop him. "Ethelgard!" Kate's voice cracked. "No, get back! Get back!" He didn't listen. He never had, not really, not when something mattered more than obedience. He plowed straight into the line of company riders scattering their horses in a chaos of screaming animals and shouting men, and in the confusion, Wade grabbed Kate's arm. "Now, move! Move!" They broke cover and ran Frank close behind gunfire, cracking wild and disorganized behind them, as Ethelgard's rampage threw the ambush into total disarray. Kate's lungs burned, her legs screamed with exhaustion, already pushed past its limits, but she ran anyway because stopping meant dying. And worse, it meant Ethelgard's sacrifice would mean nothing at all. They reached the wash and half fell, half scrambled down its steep bank mud and loose stone, giving way beneath their boots, and only once they'd put the rise between themselves and the gunfire did Kate allow herself to stop chest heaving and look back. Ethelgard, she gasped. We have to go back for him. Kate, if we go back now, we're all dead, Frank said, gripping her shoulder hard. He bought us this chance. Don't waste it. Tears burned hot in Kate's eyes. Fury and grief and terror all tangled together. I am not leaving him to die out there. A shrill, furious scream split the night above them, and Kate's heart leapt as Ethelgard's massive shape came crashing down the bank of the wash toward them, lathered and wild-eyed, but alive. Blessedly alive, having somehow broken free of the chaos and followed their scent through the dark. Thank God, Kate sobbed, reaching for him, pressing her face against his heaving neck. Thank God, you foolish, wonderful animal! We don't have time for reunions, Wade said, already moving. They'll regroup fast. We need to keep moving now. They pushed on through the gully at a punishing pace. Kate mounted bareback on Ethelgard now, since her own horse had bolted during the chaos, and it was nearly an hour before Wade finally called a halt in a narrow defile, where the rock walls rose high enough to hide them from casual view. We can't make the marshal's office tonight, he said, breathing hard. Not with them between us and town. We need another plan. What other plan is there? Kate demanded. That journal is the only thing that can stop Sen, and we can't even get it where it needs to go. A new voice answered from the darkness ahead of them, calm and measured in a way that sent ice down Kate's spine. Perhaps I can help with that. Kate's hand flew to the pistol at her hip, and Frank's rifle came up in the same instant. But the figure that stepped out from behind a boulder held both hands raised, empty and open. It was a woman, middle-aged, dressed in practical traveling clothes, gone dusty from what looked like days on the run, her face gaunt with exhaustion, but her eyes sharp and alert despite it. Who are you? Kate said, voice hard. My name is Lila Jennings, the woman said. And I believe you have something of mine. Kate's breath caught. You're supposed to be missing. Everyone's been looking for you for months. I've been hiding Mrs. Holloway. There's a difference. Lila lowered her hands slowly. I've been watching your ranch from a distance for the past 3 weeks, ever since I heard rumors of a strange horse causing tremors out at Whispering Pines. I had to be certain it was really him before I risked showing myself. You wrote the letter, Kate said slowly. You left him in my barn. I did. Something like relief passed over Lila's tired face. I couldn't keep him safe myself any longer, not with Sen's men closing in on every hiding place I tried. I needed someone Apex would never think to look at a widow running her ranch alone, no connection to the company at all. I'm sorry for the danger I've put you in truly, but I didn't know what else to do. Kate felt a dozen emotions crash together at once. Relief, fury, exhaustion. And beneath it all, a fierce and unexpected gratitude that this stranger had trusted her with something so precious. You could have told me, Kate said. Instead of a note and a horse, and no explanation at all. Would you have believed me if I'd shown up on your porch 3 weeks ago, raving about engineered horses and corporate fraud? Lila's mouth twisted wry and tired. I made the choice that seemed most likely to keep him alive, Mrs. Holloway. I stand by it even knowing what it cost you. It's cost us plenty, Frank said grimly. Company men just tried to kill us on the road not an hour past. Lila's face paled. Reeves. And 4 others. Then Sen knows you found the journal. Lila's exhaustion sharpened into real fear. He'll be moving fast now. Faster than any of us can outrun on horseback. We were riding for the territorial marshal, Kate said. Trying to get the journal into official hands before Sen could stop us. The marshal's office won't help you, Lila said flatly. Sen's had the territorial marshal in his pocket for 2 years. Paid him well to look the other way on every irregularity Apex has ever committed. She shook her head. If you'd ridden into that office with my journal, you'd have handed Sen exactly what he wanted, proof delivered right into corrupt hands with witnesses conveniently silenced. Kate's stomach dropped. Then where do we take it? There's a federal geological inspector due in the territory within the week, a man named Harmon, independent of local corruption here specifically because Apex's public claims about mineral deposits have drawn suspicion from investors back east. Lila's eyes were intense now, urgent. If we can get the journal and Ethelgard's readings to him directly verified and witnessed, Sen's fraud becomes a federal matter, untouchable by local bribes. A week, Wade said. Kate, we don't have a week, not with Sen's men already hunting us tonight. Then we hide, Lila said. There's an old mining camp 2 hours from here, abandoned, defensible. I've used it before when Sen's men got too close. We can hold there until Harmon arrives. Kate looked between them. Frank exhausted and wary, Wade tense and calculating. Lila desperate with the particular desperation of someone who'd been running too long to fully trust safety, even when it was offered, and felt the weight of the decision settle onto her shoulders. All right, she said. The mining camp. But Lila, you're riding with us, and you're going to tell me everything, every single detail about what Ethelgard really is, and what Sen's willing to do to get him back. Lila nodded grim and resolved. Fair enough, Mrs. Holloway. You've more than earned the truth. The ride to the mining camp passed in fits and starts, Lila filling the silence with details that made Kate's blood run colder with every mile. How Ethelgard had been the culmination of 5 years of secret research. How Apex had promised investors a lithium deposit worth millions based on falsified surveys. How Lila herself had discovered the fraud and been forced to flee when she refused to keep silent. He's not just a censor, Lila said, riding close beside Kate as Ethelgard carried them both through the dark. He's alive, Mrs. Holloway. Genuinely alive, with genuine instincts and genuine feeling, whatever engineering went into building his particular gifts. I made certain of that when I had the choice. I couldn't bear to create something that only pretended to live. Kate reached down and stroked Ethelgard's neck-throat tight with an emotion she didn't have words for. I never doubted that part, not since the first night. No, Lila said quietly, studying her. I don't imagine you did. That's rather why I chose you in the end. I watched you with him before I left the note. The way you spoke to him even before you understood what he was. That kind of instinct isn't something I could have engineered into a person, Mrs. Holloway. It's simply who you are. The words settled warm in Kate's chest, despite the fear and exhaustion pressing down on all of them, and she found herself glancing toward Wade riding just ahead, remembering his own quiet honesty on her porch just days before, remembering Frank's gruff loyalty, even when he doubted her choices most. They reached the mining camp as the eastern sky began to gray toward dawn, a cluster of collapsed shacks and rusted equipment tucked into a fold of the hills that would hide them from casual view, and Kate slid down from Ethelgard's back, with legs so exhausted they nearly buckled beneath her. We rest, she said, just for a few hours. Then we plan how to reach this Inspector Harmon before Sen finds us first. Nobody argued. Dunt. Kate woke to the sound of raised voices and came up off the hard ground with her pistol already in hand before she'd fully registered why. Can't just ride into town and ask around for a federal inspector, Lila, that's asking to get seen. We don't have a choice, Wade. Harmon's arrival is time-sensitive. If we miss the window... What's happening? Kate said, forcing herself upright. Wade turned to her frustration plain on his face. Lila wants to send word into town, try to reach Harmon directly before he arrives on the scheduled stage. I'm saying that's exactly the kind of move Sen's men will be watching for. He's not wrong, Frank added grimly from where he sat sharpening a knife by the cold fire pit. Sen's had 2 days now to put watchers on every road into town. Then what do you suggest? Lila's voice was tight with the frustration of someone who'd been running and hiding for months, and was desperate for it to finally end. We simply wait here indefinitely, hoping the danger passes on its own. I suggest we think this through instead of panicking into another mistake, Wade shot back. Enough, Kate said, and something in her voice cut through the argument sharp enough that both of them fell silent. Fighting each other isn't going to solve anything. We need a plan that gets the journal to Harmon without walking straight into a trap. A long silence stretched, broken only by the crackle of Frank's whetstone against his blade, before Kate spoke again, an idea forming slow and dangerous in her mind. What if Sen comes to us instead? Wade's head snapped up. What are you talking about? Sen wants Ethelgard back badly enough to send men out shooting in the dark. He wants that journal even more, now that he knows it exists. Kate's mind raced ahead, piecing the plan together, even as she spoke it aloud. What if we let him believe he's found us? Draw him out someplace public enough that he can't simply have us killed and buried without witnesses, someplace like town the same day Harmon's stage is due to arrive. That's insane, Frank said. You want to bait the most dangerous man in the territory into a public confrontation. I want to force his hand where he can't hide behind bribes and quiet violence, Kate said. Sen's whole power rests on control, on nobody knowing what he's really done. If we can expose him publicly in front of a federal inspector who can't be bought, that control breaks. Lila was staring at her now, something calculating and hopeful dawning in her tired eyes. It could work, if the timing is precise enough. It's reckless, Wade said, but Kate heard the shift in his voice, the beginning of consideration beneath the protest. It's the only plan that doesn't involve running for the rest of our lives, Kate said firmly. I've spent 2 years running from grief, Wade. I'm not interested in spending the rest of my life running from Victor Sen, too. The words hung heavy in the morning air, and Kate watched something shift in Wade's expression. Respect, maybe, or something warmer that he didn't quite have words for either. All right, he said finally. Tell us the whole plan. It took the better part of a day to work out the details, sending Frank into town, under cover of buying supplies, to confirm Harmon's stage was still scheduled to arrive the following afternoon, while Lila drafted a formal account of the fraud to accompany the journal, precise and damning in its detail. Kate spent the hours pacing, running through every possible way the plan could go wrong, and it was Wade who finally found her sitting alone near Ethelgard's picket line as evening fell, staring out at nothing in particular. You're thinking too hard, he said, settling beside her. Somebody has to. Kate managed a tired half-smile. If this goes wrong tomorrow, Wade people could die. Frank, Lila, you. She hesitated. Me. It could. Wade didn't offer false comfort, and Kate found she was grateful for that. Grateful for a man who told her hard truths instead of easy lies. But Kate, I've watched you these past weeks. Watched you take in a stray that terrified half the county, watched you stand up to Reeves without so much as a tremor in your voice, watched you ride through a canyon crawling with armed men without once considering turning back. He shook his head slowly. I don't think there's a version of tomorrow where you don't walk into that confrontation with Sen head high, whatever the cost. That obvious, huh? That admirable, Wade corrected, and something in the quiet warmth of his voice made Kate's chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with fear. I meant what I said that first morning on your porch. I've spent 8 months running from what I saw at Apex, feeling like a coward for it. Watching you these past weeks, Kate, you've reminded me what it looks like to actually stand and fight for something. Kate turned to look at him fully, the last light of evening catching the honest, weathered lines of his face. You've done plenty of standing yourself, Wade Calloway. Don't sell yourself short on my account. Maybe. He held her gaze, something unspoken passing between them, warm and fragile and entirely unexpected, given everything else weighing on the night. Whatever happens tomorrow, Kate, I want you to know I don't regret riding up to your ranch that morning. Not for one single moment of the trouble it's brought. Kate felt her breath catch. Felt something long buried and grief-numbed stir back to life in her chest, despite every instinct telling her this was neither the time nor the place. Wade, I know, he said gently, before she could find the words to finish whatever she'd been about to say. Bad timing, worse circumstances. I'm not asking for anything, Kate. Just wanted you to know it before tomorrow comes and changes everything again. Kate reached out, impulsive and uncertain, and covered his hand with her own, where it rested on the ground between them. Thank you, she said softly, for staying. For all of it. They sat together in the gathering dark, hands joined, saying nothing further, while behind them, Ethelgard shifted restless on his picket line ears, swiveling toward some distant sound only he could sense. And far off past the ridgeline, past the miles of dark canyon country between the mining camp and town. Victor Sen read Reeves's latest report by lamplight and smiled a cold, patient smile, already 3 moves ahead of a plan Kate had only just begun to set in motion. They rode into town the next afternoon in a tense, careful procession, Lila hooded and hidden among supply crates in the back of a borrowed wagon, the journal secured in Kate's satchel. Ethelgard led on a lead rope behind Wade's horse, rather than ridden his presence itself, the bait that would draw Sen out into the open. The stage was due within the hour. The town square already held a modest gathering merchants, a few curious ranchers, the kind of ordinary Tuesday crowd that made public violence a far riskier proposition than it would be on some lonely stretch of canyon road. "Steady," Wade murmured as they drew the wagon to a stop near the mercantile. "Just like we planned." It didn't take long. Kate spotted Reeves first emerging from the hotel across the square with 3 armed men flanking him, and behind them, unhurried and immaculate in a dark coat. Despite the summer heat, came a man Kate had never laid eyes on, but recognized instantly from the cold, calculating way the whole street seemed to shift around him. Victor Sen. "That's him," Wade breathed. Sen crossed the square with unhurried precision, eyes fixed on Ethelgard with an expression of naked possessive hunger that made Kate's skin crawl. "Mrs. Holloway," he said, stopping a respectful distance away, voice smooth and pleasant, in a way that only made the danger beneath it more apparent. "I understand you've caused my company a considerable amount of trouble these past weeks. Your company stole a living creature and lied to its own investors. Mr. Sen," Kate said, forcing steadiness into her voice despite her racing heart. "I'd say you've caused yourself the trouble, not me." A murmur rippled through the gathering crowd, curious eyes turning toward the confrontation, and Kate saw a flicker of irritation cross Sen's composed face at the audience he clearly hadn't expected. "I have no idea what wild accusations you're referring to," he said. "I'm simply here to recover company property that was stolen from a secure facility." "Then perhaps you'd care to explain this." Kate pulled the journal from her satchel, holding it high enough for the gathering crowd to see. "Written in Dr. Lila Jennings's own hand, detailing exactly how you falsified geological surveys to defraud your own investors." Sen's composure cracked just slightly, cold fury flashing beneath the polished surface. "That woman is a disgruntled former employee, spreading malicious lies to cover her own incompetence." "Am I?" Lila's voice rang out clear and steady as she stepped down from the wagon, throwing back her hood, and the crowd's murmur swelled into something closer to shock. "Hello, Victor. You look surprised to see me." Sen's mask slipped entirely for one raw instant fury, and something almost like fear flashing across his face before he mastered himself. "Lila, how resourceful of you resurfacing at such a convenient moment." "Not resourceful, Victor, just patient. I've been waiting for the right witness to make sure the truth actually mattered when I finally spoke it." Lila's eyes swept the gathered crowd. "Federal Inspector Harmon is due to arrive on the stage within the hour. I intend to hand him this journal, along with sworn testimony, the moment he steps off it." The color drained from Sen's face, replaced almost instantly by something colder and more dangerous. "You wouldn't dare cause such a public scene, not with everything at stake." "I already have," Lila said. "Look around you, Victor." Sen's eyes swept the crowd, the merchants and ranchers who'd stopped their business entirely to watch the confrontation unfold, and Kate saw the exact moment his calculation shifted, the exact moment he realized public violence was no longer a viable option with so many witnesses gathered close. "This isn't over," he said, voice low and venomous, pitched for only Kate and Lila to hear. "Whatever you think you've accomplished today, Mrs. Holloway, I promise you, this is far from finished." "Then let's finish it properly," Kate said, standing her ground, despite every instinct screaming at her to step back from the naked menace radiating off him. "In front of the whole territory, Mr. Sen, let them see exactly what kind of man you really are." For a long, brittle moment, Sen simply stared at her, calculating and furious in equal measure. Then somewhere in the distance, the unmistakable sound of an approaching stagecoach rattled through the square, and Kate watched something in Victor Sen's composed, dangerous face finally truly break. The stage rattled to a stop at the far end of the square, and Kate felt the whole crowd hold its breath along with her, as the door swung open, and a lean silver-haired man in a plain traveling coat stepped down a leather case clutched in one hand. "That's Harmon," Lila breathed. "Federal Geological Inspector." Sen's jaw tightened, but he didn't run. Didn't so much as flinch, and Kate understood in that instant why he'd built the empire. He had. The man simply did not know how to lose gracefully, only how to pivot. "Inspector Harmon," Sen called out, voice smooth as poured honey striding forward before Kate or Lila could reach him first. "Victor Sen Apex Consortium. Welcome to the territory. I'm afraid you've arrived in the middle of some rather unfortunate theatrics." Harmon's sharp eyes flicked past Sen, taking in the crowd, the tension Kate standing rigid with the journal clutched in both hands. "Theatrics, Mr. Sen." A disgruntled former employee and a rancher with an overactive imagination spinning wild tales about company fraud. Sen's smile didn't waver. "I assure you Apex Consortium's surveys are entirely above board. I'd be happy to walk you through our findings personally." "I'm sure you would." Harmon's tone stayed carefully neutral, but Kate caught something sharp beneath it, the practiced skepticism of a man who'd heard 100 smooth denials in his career. He turned toward Kate. "And you are?" "Kate Holloway. I own Whispering Pines Ranch." Kate stepped forward, heart hammering so hard she was certain the whole square could hear it, and held out the journal with a hand that only trembled slightly. "This belongs to Dr. Lila Jennings, formerly of Apex Consortium. It documents falsified geological surveys, direct orders from Mr. Sen to alter data before it reached investors, and a living creature engineered specifically to detect what the company already suspected, that there's no lithium deposit worth what Apex has promised." The square went dead silent. "That's a serious allegation, Mrs. Holloway." Harmon's eyes moved between her and Sen, weighing, calculating. "One I take seriously enough to require substantial proof before acting on it." "This is preposterous." Sen cut in sharp, now the smooth mask finally cracking under real pressure. "Inspector, I won't stand here and be slandered by a widow chasing headlines and a scientist too incompetent to keep her own position." "I'd be careful, Victor," Lila said, voice cutting clean through his tirade. "Slander requires falsehood. Everything in that journal is documented fact with your own signature attached to the memos ordering the fraud." Sen's face went white, then red fury finally breaking through the polished veneer he'd worn so carefully. "You have no proof that horse is anything but a common animal, whatever fantasy you three have constructed. Then perhaps," Kate said, voice ringing out steady and clear across the square, "we should let him speak for himself." She turned and led Ethelgard forward, the crowd parting instinctively around his massive frame, and knelt in the dirt of the square, pressing her palm flat against the ground, the way she had that first storming night. "Show them," she murmured. "Show them what you showed me." For one terrifying, endless moment, nothing happened, and Kate felt her heart plummet, felt the whole plan teetering on the edge of humiliating failure in front of the one man whose belief actually mattered. Then Ethelgard stomped once hard, and the ground shuddered, not violently, not the way it had during the true tremors, but distinct enough that gasps rippled through the crowd, distinct enough that Inspector Harmon's sharp eyes widened with genuine professional interest. "Do that again," Harmon said, crossing quickly to kneel beside Kate, pressing his own palm to the dirt. Ethelgard obliged, striking the pattern Kate had memorized over weeks of storming nights. And this time Harmon's face went taut with focus, counting under his breath, comparing what he felt against something only he understood the significance of. "That's a resonance pattern," he murmured almost to himself. "Consistent, deliberate. Mrs. Holloway has this animal done this before. Every time there's genuine seismic instability underground," Kate said. "He predicted 3 tremors before they happened. I felt it myself, and so did my foreman." "That's not possible," Sen snapped, but his voice had lost its smooth confidence entirely, now replaced by something raw and desperate. "Inspector, this is absurd theater, nothing more." "Mr. Sen," Harmon said, rising slowly, brushing dirt from his knees, with deliberate calm that somehow felt more dangerous than anger would have. I've spent 11 years investigating fraudulent mineral claims across 4 territories. I've learned to recognize genuine anomalies when I encounter them. He held out his hand toward Kate. The journal, Mrs. Holloway, if you please. Kate handed it over, hands finally steady now that the moment had arrived, and watched Harmon flip through the pages with growing intensity, his expression darkening with every entry he read. Dr. Jennings, he said finally, looking up at Lila, are you prepared to give sworn testimony regarding the contents of this journal? I am, Lila said. I've been waiting months for someone honest enough to give it to. Harmon's gaze swung back to Sen, and whatever remained of the smooth, confident businessman crumbled entirely under the weight of that look. Mr. Sen, I'll require you to remain in this territory, pending a full federal investigation into Apex Consortium's geological claims and internal financial practices. I'd advise against attempting to leave before that investigation concludes. You can't be serious? Sen hissed. On the word of a hysterical widow and a discredited scientist, on documented evidence, sworn testimony, and physical demonstration I witnessed myself. Harmon corrected coldly. I've seen enough fraud in my career to know when I'm looking at the real thing, Mr. Sen. This has the shape of it. The crowd murmured louder now, and Kate saw something shift in the faces around her. Suspicion where there had been curiosity, anger where there had been indifference, the slow-building fury of ordinary people realizing they'd been lied to and endangered for the sake of one man's profit. Reeves shifted uneasily beside his employer, and Kate watched calculation flicker across his face, the particular calculation of a man deciding whether loyalty was still worth the risk. Victor, Reeves said quietly. Maybe we should... Shut up, Sen snapped, and the crack in his composure widened further, ugly and desperate now, in front of the whole watching square. It was in that moment of chaos, with Sen's careful control shattering in public view, that a new sound cut through the tension. Hoofbeats fast and hard, a lone rider tearing into the square at a dead run. Mr. Sen, the rider shouted, reining in, hard face pale with urgency. Sir, the Eastern claim the survey crew found something. A real deposit, sir, half a mile from where the original survey marked it. It's genuine, sir. It's actually there. Joy. The square erupted into stunned murmurs, and Kate felt the ground shift beneath her in a way that had nothing to do with Ethelgard's warnings. That's impossible, Lila said, staring at the messenger. The surveys I saw showed nothing at that location. The old surveys, the writer said, still catching his breath. New readings taken just this morning following patterns the horse marked out weeks back near the eastern ridge. Kate's mind raced, understanding dawning slow and strange. He wasn't disproving the deposit, she said softly. He was finding the real one. In the right place, not the place Apex claimed. Harmon's sharp eyes moved between the messenger, the journal, and Ethelgard standing calm and steady in the square. Mr. Sen, he said slowly, it appears your falsified survey wasn't merely dishonest, it was also incompetent. You built an elaborate fraud around a deposit that didn't exist in the location you claimed, while the genuine deposit sat undiscovered half a mile away. Sen's face had gone the color of old ash. That changes nothing. The fraud charges remain entirely valid, Harmon said. Perhaps more damning given this new information. You were willing to defraud investors and endanger lives over a deposit you never bothered to properly locate. He turned to the messenger. Is the eastern claim on Apex land, or does it cross onto adjacent property? The rider hesitated, glancing nervously at Sen before answering. Adjacent, sir. Mostly. Crosses onto the old Cutter spread, and... His eyes flicked toward Kate, apologetic. And onto Whispering Pines Ranch, ma'am. About a third of it by the survey crew's reckoning. The square went utterly silent. Kate felt the weight of every eye turned toward her, felt Wade's hand find hers, steady and grounding, amid the impossible turn the day had taken. Mrs. Holloway, Harmon said carefully. It would appear you own a legitimate stake in a genuine mineral deposit discovered through means I'm still struggling to fully credit, despite witnessing them myself. Kate's mind reeled, grief and fury and disbelief all colliding at once. "I don't want Apex's money," she said finally, voice hoarse. "I don't want anything built on the lies that put my ranch, my foreman, and the people I care about in danger." "That's admirable, Mrs. Holloway, but the law doesn't work on sentiment," Harmon said, not unkindly. "If a legitimate deposit exists on your property, you have legal claim to it regardless of the fraud surrounding its discovery. What you choose to do with that claim is entirely your own decision." Kate looked at Ethelgard standing patient and steady amid the chaos he'd inadvertently caused, and felt something settle in her chest. Not triumph, not exactly, but a fierce, quiet clarity. "Then I'll decide," she said, "once Victor Sen is standing in front of a judge instead of hiding behind lawyers and bribes." The days that followed passed in a blur of federal marshals, sworn statements, and the particular exhaustion that came from watching a carefully built lie collapse in slow motion under the weight of its own rot. Sen was taken into federal custody within the week, Reeves turning state's evidence with the speed of a man who'd never truly been loyal to anyone but his own skin, and the territorial marshal who'd taken Sen's bribes found himself facing his own investigation soon after. Kate stood in her own kitchen one evening, nearly 2 weeks after that chaotic afternoon in the square, staring at legal papers spread across her table, documents establishing her claim to the genuine mineral deposit documents that could make her wealthier than she'd ever imagined being. "You're not going to sign them," Wade said, not quite a question, standing in the doorway with his hat in his hands, the way he had that very first morning. "I don't know yet." Kate looked up at him, tired but lighter somehow than she'd felt in longer than she could remember. "Part of me wants to burn the whole claim and be done with it. Let the ground stay quiet the way it should have been all along. And the other part remembers I've got a ranch to keep running and a foreman who deserves to retire someday without worrying himself sick over debts." Kate managed a tired smile. "Maybe there's a way to have both. Take enough to secure the ranch properly and see the rest set aside for something better than lining anyone's pockets." Wade crossed the kitchen and sat across from her, the same easy, careful presence he'd carried since that first rainy morning. "You know, Lila mentioned something before she left for the capital to give her federal testimony. Said she intended to use her share if any came to her to fund proper study of creatures like Ethelgard. Ethical study this time. Making sure nothing like what Apex did ever happens to another living thing again." Kate's chest tightened at the thought. "That sounds like something worth putting money toward." "Thought you might feel that way." They sat together in comfortable silence a moment, and Kate found her gaze drifting toward the window, toward the paddock, where Ethelgard grazed easy in the golden evening light, no longer hunted, no longer hidden, simply free. "He saved all of us," she said softly. "More times than I can rightly count. He did." Wade's voice had gone gentle. "And near as I can tell, Kate, none of it would have happened if you hadn't opened that barn door and decided to trust something the whole world wanted to call a monster, or a machine, instead of what he really was." Kate looked over at him, warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the summer evening outside. "Turns out I've got a habit of trusting strays that show up on my doorstep unannounced." Something warm flickered in Wade's tired eyes. "Is that so?" "Fence-fixing drifters included," Kate said, a real smile breaking through despite everything the past weeks had cost her. "Though I recall telling you I hadn't decided how much to trust you last time we spoke honest on this. And now..." Kate reached across the table, covering his hand with her own, steady and sure, in a way that surprised even herself. "Now I think I've decided plenty." Autumn came early that year, the way it sometimes did in the high country, and Kate stood at the fence line of Whispering Pines Ranch, watching the sun sink low and gold over land that was for the first time in longer than she could remember genuinely at peace. Frank had taken to calling Wade the fence man, with a fondness that had replaced his earlier suspicion entirely, and the two of them worked the ranch together most days now, easy and companionable, in a way that filled Kate's chest with a quiet gratitude she'd never expected to feel again after Daniel's death. Lila's letters arrived every few weeks from the capital, full of updates on Sen's trial on the foundation she was building to ensure Project E7 remained the last of its kind rather than the first of many on the strange, unexpected friendship that had grown between a widow rancher and a scientist on the run. And Ethelgard. Ethelgard simply lived now, no longer a secret to hide, no longer a weapon for anyone to claim or covet. Just a horse who happened to feel the earth's deepest truths beneath his hooves, grazing easy in the paddock behind the barn that had first sheltered him on a storming summer night that felt a lifetime past already. Kate walked out to him now the way she did most evenings and pressed her palm flat against his warm neck, feeling his steady pulse beneath her hand. "You were never a weapon." She murmured the same words she'd whispered to herself 100 times since that day in the square. Whatever they built you to be, whatever they wanted to use you for, you were never that. Not really. Ethelgard turned his great head and nuzzled against her shoulder, gentle as he'd been from that very first frightened, uncertain night, and Kate felt the last knot of fear finally loosen in her chest, replaced by something steadier, something that felt almost like home. Behind her, she heard Wade's footsteps approaching, unhurried and familiar now, in a way that had become its own quiet comfort over these past weeks. "Frank's got supper ready," he said, coming to stand beside her at the fence. "Says if you don't come in soon, he's feeding it to the horse instead." Kate laughed, real and unguarded, a sound she hadn't managed easily in the 2 long years since Daniel's death. "Wouldn't be the worst meal he's ever had given everything this horse has been through." "No," Wade agreed, smiling. "I don't suppose it would." They stood together a moment longer, watching the last light fade gold and soft, over the ranch over the fences Wade had mended, and the barn that had sheltered a secret worth more than any lithium claim over the whole hard-won peace they'd fought so fiercely to protect. "I used to think trusting something meant setting yourself up to lose it," Kate said quietly. "Learned that lesson the hard way burying Daniel. Spent 2 years after that making sure I never trusted anything enough to grieve it again. And now—" Kate looked at him at the barn at Ethelgard grazing peaceful in the gathering dusk, and felt something settle deep and permanent in her chest. Not the absence of grief. Never that, but something strong enough to stand beside it. "Now I think some things are worth the risk of loving them anyway," she said. "Worth trusting, worth fighting for, worth every bit of danger it takes to keep them safe." Wade reached for her hand, and Kate let him take it steady and sure beneath a sky finally settling toward the quiet dark of an ordinary peaceful night. Whispering Pines Ranch stood exactly where it always had weathered, and enduring against whatever storms the years still had left to bring. But it stood now with something it hadn't held in a very long time. A widow no longer alone, a horse no longer hunted, and a truth hard-won and fiercely protected, finally free to live in the open light of day. And that, Kate Holloway thought, watching the last color fade from the western sky, was worth every single storm it had taken to find.